Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. I am Dan Lush, joined this week by Mike Lawson and Tarun Sharma. What's up, boys?
What's up?
So,
what's up, Dan?
Before we get into the Masters and the Scotty Scheffler win, we got some fun topics, but I have a story for you guys, which I did not tell you. So that fun little lead-in music, we get asked about that a lot. That is a song called Brass Bonanza. Dan Wallach picked that song. It was the Hartford Whalers goal song back in the day. The Hartford Whalers and the National Hockey League ended up becoming the Carolina Hurricanes, and that song was kind of retired. So now that song has had a second life, A, through our podcast, but B, guys, are you ready for this? It is my 2-year-old's favorite song. She calls it Daddy's song, and she goes crazy. She dances in a circle and she wants me to hold her hand. This girl loves Brass Bonanza. So everyone that's emailing us, what's that catchy song in the beginning? My 2-year-old, she's on it. She's on the scent. She loves Daddy's song. Listen, guys, we're in the thick of sports season all of a sudden. After that Super Bowl lull, we got baseball, we got basketball playoffs, we got hockey, and the Masters. Scotty Scheffler. Do you guys have any money on the Masters?
I did not, no. But my buddy texted me. He goes, "You have to root for Cam Smith because I put money on him." I was like, okay, fine, fair enough. And then Cam Smith immediately had like 5 bogeys. I was like, sorry.
That big story was that obviously Tiger was back again. He engenders like such extreme reactions. I've got buddies that just hate Tiger's guts and then guys that would literally die for Tiger. So it's just interesting hearing that sort of discourse between those two groups.
It's definitely a hit or miss with like the fandom, but you cannot deny the people who are at the Masters or any event, really, any golf tournament he's ever in. They flood and follow him. And I saw a TikTok. It's really interesting. This girl said they call it the Tiger effect. And she used to work for a marketing company that did analysis for concession stands for golf companies and golf country clubs. And whenever a tournament would play there, they needed to know, how many tickets did they sell? And that would correlate to the amount of beverages and food they were going to sell. And they had it down to a perfect science. But they said they had a clause in their system where it was called the Tiger effect. And if Tiger was ever playing, then the numbers were completely washed. And it was always different because normally people go to a tournament like the Masters, they buy a general admission ticket, but you can sit, and typically they'll sit at one hole and just watch everybody come through. But with Tiger, everybody wants to follow Tiger, and there's concessions at each hole. So every time it moved, it would be different for every single hole. So the Tiger, no matter what, whatever you think about him and whatever, if you're a fan of his golf game or his off-course antics, like, doesn't matter, but he clearly has a dramatic effect on the game, and it's unbelievable to watch.
Big time, because people just wanted to see something special happen on the golf course. We go to sporting events in hopes of being able to see something special. So today, when I went down to the Twins-Dodgers game, I wanted to see Clayton Kershaw pitch. He's perfect through 7 innings. I wanted to see Dave Roberts give him an opportunity to see if he could finish it off. There's been, 22 perfect games out of like 20,000 baseball games played? Mm-hmm. Give him a chance.
Listen, this is a sports podcast, but we are all here. We got 2 lawyers and a soon-to-be 3L lawyer, soon to be adjunct professor of sports law, Tarun. You're going to get Mike. You're the only adjunct missing. We'll get you on board soon enough. But listen, we got a busy roadmap for today. I do want to talk about Clayton Kershaw. We will give that some time. Listen, we got to hit our marks here. So the story we covered it last week with the Washington Commanders, but the update is that this financial impropriety, this cook in the books, it actually went a little bit further. I think we only talked about one level of it. That was by AJ Perez, and that was the 2 books, the underreporting of ticket revenue. But now the scheme is a little bit deeper that, allegedly tickets were being pretended that they were Kenny Chesney ticket concerts and Navy game concerts, which is going to be pretty coincidental that we have Kevin Darby on. Kevin Darby won our March Madness pool. He's a JAG lawyer. He's served in the Navy for 7 years. He's going to be on. He won March Madness, so he'll be on at some point at the end of our show. But we're going to talk about the Commanders, the update in that, which is the biggest story in the sports law world. We were a week ahead of it, and now all of a sudden the national media is all over it. So we're happy to go over the update. Second, a story that we've hit a lot. Every time Deshaun Watson has an update, I get flooded with DMs. We want to keep everyone posted. 2 big updates on the Watson front. The long and short is that Busby is not going away. He's doubling down, and he's trying to hold this thing up for a significant amount of time. So we'll talk about the Watson updates. And last but not least, John Canzano, friend of the show, he's Fox Sports Oregon. He gave me the heads up about this case going on. Oregon University is getting sued by a former offensive lineman, an $120 million lawsuit where the NCAA is also a defendant. It's not a case that's maybe an A-level story or even a B-level story, but it probably should be. It's really questioning the NCAA's role in overseeing the safety of off-season workouts. How hard can you work a player? And if a player gets hurt as a result of a really hard workout, whose fault is it? Is it the school's fault? Is it the coach's fault? Or is it the NCAA for not having rules in place to prevent it? So it's a really interesting lawsuit. Willie Taggart, now the head coach at Florida Atlantic University, was at that point in 2017 the coach of the Oregon Ducks. We are a sports law podcast. That's a very heavy litigation, a lot of money at stake. So we should get into that. Let's give a nice note to our friends over at Themis. And then Tarun, I'll give it over to you to talk about some commanders. Themis Bar Review sponsors this podcast. They are the top bar prep company, not only in the nation, not only in this continent, but in the entire world. So I don't, sometimes I say they're the top one in the galaxy, but I just need people to know that they have the top bar prep company ever. I don't know what other qualifiers I could do at this point. themisbar.com/Conduct Detrimental. They've been really good to us. They're our first sponsor ever on the podcast, and they're sticking with us for the long run. Mike and I shared our metrics over the last year about how much we've grown. We've literally grown 400%. It's not a fake number that I'm saying just to, whatever, just we really are thankful for how big the show has grown. Maybe not coincidental. Themis actually started with us right as we started to hit our apex. So maybe we'll give those guys some credit too. A little bit of credit. It's a little shake and bake action. So definitely head over to Themis Bar. Those guys are the best ones for all of your bar prep needs. Topic number 1, Tarun, Washington Commanders. Take it away.
Yeah, the House Oversight and Reform Committee, which has been investigating this, and our friend AJ Perez came on and told us about all the testimony, they released a letter, the 20-page letter from the committee this week. It says that they believe that the Washington Commanders have been hiding revenue. That's critical. That's critical for all the important stakeholders here. So they believe that based on Jason Friedman's testimony, he's a former team employee, that the team might have retained as much as $5 million in deposits from approximately 2,000 customers. So the way that the Congress people were describing it, it was as if it was running like it's the Godfather. So I think it's more dirt on Snyder. And we talked about this when AJ was on, but it still feels like this isn't going to be enough, right? Mike, did you have thoughts on the letter?
It's funny. I was texting with Stephanie when she had created that whole thread of everything digging deep into Snyder's, and then we had AJ on talking about the 2 sets of books. And automatically, when you think 2 sets of books, there has to be more there, right? Like nobody keeps 2 sets of books if you're not doing some shady stuff. So you're right. I think the ultimate question is there enough there to force Dan Snyder to sell the team? And it's funny. I have a partner at my law firm who every single day or every time the Commanders pops up, he's an old school Washington Redskins fan, Washington football team fan. And every time he comes to my office, he goes, are they going to make Dan Snyder sell the team? Please tell me they're going to make Dan Snyder sell the team, because that's what the entire fan base wants at this point, because there's so many things happening all at once. And we can't lose sight of the actual start of this, which was the sexual abusive nature that was fostered and created by Dan Snyder, which started this whole thing, right? You had the emails that were unloaded, the 650,000 emails too, but there's so many things happening right now where you start to believe that anything that comes up with Dan Snyder and what he was doing has to be wrong. And at this point, say what you want about everything else, right? In the terms of the NFL, it's a business, right? They could have done some sort of closed door deal. The owners aren't going to vote him out. But what happens here is this is a 40% fee sharing system that is agreed by all NFL teams. So this directly implicates all of the other owners. So you have to imagine that you need a 75% vote to vote the owner out. You have to imagine that you've got 3/4 of the owners that are like, hey, you weren't doing what you were supposed to. Or they don't want to set a precedent here because this would open their books up if something happened on their, or they're doing the same thing. And they're like, we don't want our books to be opened either. It's tough to decide, but I would have to imagine based upon this now, and now it's going to the FTC and they're going to be going through everything, that there's enough ammo here that they can force sell Dan Snyder.
What I don't want people to lose sight of, like we were on top of this, people like maybe people were saying like, why are you guys covering this again? Because the story hit another level, right? It hit also a national level to an A-level story to a point now, which I guess I hope this point makes sense. Ian Rappaport works for the NFL Network. He writes for NFL.com. NFL.com is covering a story where Dan Snyder is allegedly stealing money from other owners. That should tell you a lot, that the NFL is willing to run that story. So we can say all we want. Hey, other owners are potentially pissed. Like, you know who runs NFL.com and the NFL Network? The NFL. You know the NFL is made up of? The other owners. If you steal from your colleagues, right? I'm not saying that he did it, I'm saying if you steal from your other colleagues and your other colleagues are billionaires, I said this on social, I meant it, it doesn't usually end well. So what happened between last week and today? The House Oversight Committee, we knew the testimony that was elicited. I guess AJ had heard from, through the grapevines of one of the allegations. The allegation specifically of this holding back 40% of ticket revenue. So I alluded to it at the beginning. The other part of that scheme that has now since come out, and this was because of a letter that the House Oversight Committee wrote to the Federal Trade Commission, almost egging them on to pursue this as a, some type of white collar crime, some type of consumer fraud investigation. But it's an allegation essentially that, that Snyder stole money from fans, Snyder stole money from owners. There could be a crime involved here. So here's what happened. The 40% ticket revenue, you guys can go back and listen to the podcast. We spent a lot of time talking about it, but the Commanders basically were taking in ticket revenue from visiting from games and not reporting it fully back to the league. So they were taking money from owners and that, right? That's the allegation. Okay, but here's the thing. They were baking back in, I guess, to kind of cook the books to make the money go back somewhere else. They were pretending that certain game attendance was actually like a Kenny Chesney music concert. So they were pretending like, oh, we didn't have that many tickets for like our football game. Actually, we just had a really well-attended Kenny Chesney concert. And that obviously, Kenny Chesney concert doesn't need to be part of the revenue sharing with other owners. So the other part of the allegation is that they diverted some fan attendance numbers over to a Navy college football game. So now the scheme is a little deeper. And then the other part of this, Tarun, maybe you could speak to this as a season ticket holder of every single team in the entire country.
New Minnesota season ticket holder for the Twins. I have never had season tickets before.
You're at so many games. I just assume, Tarun. You probably go to, I'm not kidding, you probably go to more games than really anybody I know.
I enjoy doing that.
I'm just impressed. Here's the allegation, and maybe you can tell me this from a Washington standpoint. Apparently, in order to have season tickets or some type of reoccurring tickets, you needed to put a security deposit down with the organization. So at least according to this testimony, a lot of these fans would never try. I guess it was very complicated to get back your deposit when you got season tickets. It's very complicated to get it back. So Washington, at least the allegation is that they intentionally made it really complicated, so much so that they knew fans would give up on these security deposits. And then after a certain amount of time, but this is the crazy part, they would call kind of skimming money from something internally, like these little different schemes. They would call it juice. And juice was a term that was intended to mean we're doing something shady. Let's call the money juice because it sounds much cooler. I have no idea what it was for, but he kept calling it juice. So essentially, Dan wants you to do this. Like Dan wants you to get money from the juice security deposits. Find $1 million in juice. And they would basically take these, they say that the fans had forfeited these security deposits in this kind of scheme, and they would just take that. And the money would go, into the organization, into the owner's pocket. But yeah, so it's two levels of the allegation that came out. And then Ian Rappaport picked it up. Really, every major media outlet had it. Tarun, I'll give it to you. You grew up rooting for the team. Is this? Do you have any insight? Does this surprise you? What are your thoughts as a fan of the team here?
Before you jump in, Tarun, it's clear to me that after all this has come out, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze.
Oh,
that's terrible. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that they were engaged in shady business practices. Like, what was the thing that people always brought up really first with Dan is that, he sues grandmas if they can't afford their season tickets anymore. So right. The fact that they would be trying to basically funnel this cash or launder this cash through different means to avoid paying it out to the players and to the other owners is not surprising to me. Friedman's testimony in particular that a lot of these practices started in 2006 after attendance was really starting to fall. That makes sense, right? This is the type of person that Dan is, and that when things got difficult, he was willing to bend the rules a little bit more. I think that all of this gives so much more credence to what Steph said in that thread, right? That there is a clear pattern that would seem to fit this type of action, this type of shady business dealing. So whether it'll be enough, I don't know. I'm not confident. I'll believe it when I see it, really.
I want to give you a glimmer of hope because I see you have this look in your face that like, this is never going to happen. You ready for this?
Yeah.
The odds of it happening are very unlikely because it's never happened in sports, but we're mounting here. Now, just hear me out on this here. You know, we have a good amount of Washington fans that reach out. Someone was trying to engage me to file a class action lawsuit on their behalf. So I don't think that necessarily is going to happen. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be me that does it, but you know, there are people out there that are at least thinking about it. What's different here about this allegation from why, you know, Tarun, if people go back in our archives, we went through those John Moog text messages with the majority owners suing the minority owners. That's Steph's theory. The more serious shit, that text that was sent to Dan Snyder. This is, I think, what they were getting at, right? And that was the crux of Stephanie's thread. But just hear me out for a second here. The Deshaun Watson stuff, which we're going to talk about, that's a he said, she said. Short of some surveillance video, we don't really know exactly what happened. But an allegation that someone cooked the books is verifiable. It's actually pretty easy to verify. You look at what was submitted to the league, and then you actually look at the Washington's books. You look at what came in. That's verifiable, right? That's the danger with these allegations. So I don't just say it to say it. I say, if established, he could lose his team. This you can show very easily. You know, it's a matter of how transparent the league wants to be. But now the NFL is launching an investigation. So when you steal from other owners, the NFL is going to look into this. And it doesn't matter what Snyder said. Oh, I don't know what happened. Snyder's only defense here, truly, if I'm you know, trying to get 3-4 steps ahead of this, Snyder's going to say that he had no knowledge of what was going on underneath him. He had no concept of what was happening. So that's going to be Snyder's defense. If he really wants to get ahead of this, that's going to be his argument. Because it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to defend this on the merits, that this thing didn't happen, right? There seems to be enough smoke here. This guy, Jason Friedman, was in charge of the department, it seems like, that was doing this. So the guy seemingly running an illegal scheme here is admitting it, but he's saying that it was directed in some way, shape, or form by Snyder. That's where he's going to have his fight here. And that's, if you're going back in your sports law history books, that's the same argument that people had trying to, you know, litigate Joe Paterno's history, whether or not he knew what was going on underneath him with Sandusky and these really ugly allegations of, you know, molestation and sexual assault. So I think that's going to be Snyder's saving grace. It's the same thing, like, you know, we were talking about Robert Sarver with the Phoenix Sun stuff not so long ago. That Sarver's allegation, his defense is like, he was joking. He didn't mean this stuff. Like, if you can't get around the fact that you might have said something, right? You're always going to say, I was joking. That's, I think, Snyder, a version of what he's going to say. Hey, this might have happened, but I wasn't overseeing this. I didn't know what was going on. There's no way I would have known about it. So, you know, assuming that's where we get to, I still might think it's enough. You know, if I was betting on it, I you know, legitimately, I don't want to set people's hopes up. I'd probably put the odds at like plus 400. Well, it's not unheard of.
Wow.
Not unheard of.
That's better than I thought, actually. Well, I was going to say like plus 1,000 at least.
Well,
I didn't think that.
But I don't want to say that they're going to force him to sell, but that he might end up just selling, right? Because that's what's happened. Jerry Richardson sold. People
saying this isn't worth it. I'll take the $3 billion or whatever that.
He'll do it in a way that is satisfying for him.
I don't think we can make light of what just was happened this past week. The guy is now under federal investigation. The FTC is investigating him. Like, that's something that really serious white collar criminals get investigated. Not say that's going to happen here, but everyone hates Dan Snyder. You want to know why they hate him? Because he owns the Washington Commanders. They'll hate him a lot less once he doesn't own the team anymore. In that case, if it does end up being a federal crime, right, or some type of thing, it's going to get a lot less media attention if he no longer owns the team. So I'm just giving you way, way, way down the road, just forecasting. But I wanted to put it out there. I actually do think it is much more likely today than I did last week that he ends up not owning the team. I still don't think the league is going to force anybody necessarily to sell. I just think it's very rare. But I think it's more likely today that he voluntarily gives up or loses in some sense.
Last thing on that. The NFL, like you said, has brought in Mary Jo White, who was the SEC chair, to look at these things. They've apparently turned out 200,000 pages of documents so far to this House Oversight Committee. Maybe they find something in there and maybe there's more to be found that they'll turn over, whether they're willing to slow play it and protect Dan. But this could have all been avoided. The Learners, who own the Nationals and helped get Nats Park built, they were the runner-up to Dan Snyder to buy the Redskins years and years ago. So kind of wish that we never had to deal with it, but hopefully it's coming to a head.
I have to believe, to play off of Dan's point, I think if charges are brought, that there's got to be something that results here, some sort of sale. But sticking with the NFL, there was some NFL news on the Deshaun Watson front. Just on a high level here, we've talked about it. We've a number of podcasts. We had these 22 civil lawsuits against Deshaun Watson. And we've gotten to the point now where we've gone through deposition testimony for a lot of them. Discovery phase is moving forward, and some of them need to be scheduled for trial. So it's becoming more and more clear now that some of the 22 might be moving forward and trying to schedule trial. Although with recent news, it doesn't appear so. It appears that it might get pushed back until next year, 2023, and that there has to be some sort of wait for the actual scheduling of the trial. And then there is the actual discovery that has to be turned over by some of the plaintiffs regarding their relationship with Deshaun Watson, besides the fact that they were the massage therapists. But Dan, I know that you are all over this. You've been over this since the beginning. So what is happening in terms of the scheduling of these trials and going forward?
I think the topic is so interesting because it's criminal elements, there's civil elements, and there's the NFL element. So it's one of these stories that hits all three. It's another reason I keep going back to Trevor Bauer stuff. I just find it interesting. It hits so many different elements of sports law. So, when Watson got traded, what I warned Cleveland Browns fans of, and I said that these cases could very well go into 2023. And Browns fans were starting to have a heart attack in their replies. Like, what? How is this possible? He's not getting charged criminally. These cases should be go away. They should get dismissed. I'm like, well, listen, these are civil cases. You can file a motion to dismiss in a civil case, but when there's a he said, she said type deal, it's not going to get dismissed. When there's triable issues of material fact, when there's something that's unclear and you need a jury or a judge, a fact finder to make a determination, that's not right for a motion practice. So either it's going to settle or it's going to go to trial. More often than not, these cases settle, but I just said, absent settlement, they could go into 2023. So there's two updates, Mike. In the latest scheduling order, the parties agreed. So Tony Busby is the attorney for the 22, plaintiffs in the case. And obviously Rusty Hardin's on the other side, who, give the guy credit, he's done a great job so far in this case handling it. Rusty Hardin represents Deshaun Watson. They have agreed that no trial will be scheduled between August 1st of 2022 and March 1st of 2023. Mike, Tarun, first one to buzz in wins. Do you have any concept of what those dates represent? Those
NFL season.
NFL season. Tarun, that's when
NFL season.
That's why you don't stay on mute. You got to be ready for the hot seat. There was apparently an agreement, right? That's not a coincidence that those dates are blocked off. It's very rare that a scheduling order would block off, months of a period of time. So I'm not sure why Tony Busby agreed to that. It seems a little odd that he's just floating these cases and making his clients go through this for another year. It seems strange. But the other reason, if I can think of it, right? We spent a lot of time on this podcast, right, guys, talking about the way that Deshaun Watson structured his contract. $1 million base for the upcoming year. And then it's a very heavily backloaded contract. So, people are saying, when do you think Watson's going to get suspended? I'm like, well, he could get suspended this year. It's possible. Or he could get suspended after the trial. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. But if it's that later scenario, there's a scenario where the suspension comes out of the much more lucrative type deals, year 2, year 3, year 4. So that's a reason that Tony Busby potentially did that to maybe create a little bit more leverage. So I guess that's step one. I don't know if I necessarily buy it, but I find it very odd. And I guess, Mike, you're on the litigation side. Have you ever seen 9 months blocked off for trial? There's a dark period of time. It seems like the judge wanted to speed this thing along, and Busby and Hardin did not.
I don't regularly see judges willing to just extend 9 months, right? These are judges with active dockets. They have cases filed and assigned to them every single day. So typically the point of conferences with judge and scheduling orders is okay, let's find something that's realistic and let's get this thing done. It's right, not let's kick it a whole year. I don't really know. I did have a question for you before you get into the second part of the update, Dan. So August 1st is our deadline here. We are coming on a little less than 4 months away from that point now. How realistic is it for any of these to be ripe enough to be scheduled for trial prior to that August 1?
Oh, I read it the other way. I see what you're saying. Now, I think the understanding is that we're not going to be done with discovery before August 1st. That this case
Correct.
It's going to move further. So I guess it's probably a good transition point. So I think there's going to be, Mike, much more discovery that's needed in these next 4 months. So if there was no more discovery, we were done with depositions, right? Watson already testified. I think all the women testified. And in theory, you could turn around and have a trial within 4 months. It's not that crazy. But keep in mind, Mike, my understanding is that all 22 cases need to be tried separately, right? They need to be done separately. So if you just talk about that, you're not going to get 20 trials in before August 1st. There's no way. I don't think either side would agree to have some trials first and some trials later. So I think the logical reading of this is that it's all going to be kicked post March 1st of 2023. So the other part of the update is a fascinating one, and it's one that Cleveland fans. We have a lot of Cleveland listeners, even though we just make fun of their sports teams relentlessly between the Guardians and the Browns. I mean,
friend of the pod, Sir Yacht. He's a Cleveland sports guy, and all he does is rip on Cleveland sports. So,
did you see what Sir Yacht is up to this week? I mean,
he's
in
traveling
all
to
the Cleveland.
13 Cleveland cities in 10 days. Yeah, I love it.
People hate on Sir Yacht. I like Sir Yacht. The man is a hustler. The man is an entrepreneur. I respect the hustle. Yacht is a one of one, and anybody can be on a yacht path. But Yacht, listen, you drive around the country for 2 weeks, visiting all of the Clevelands. He's visiting 13 cities called Cleveland in a 10-day period. He went to Cleveland, New York. He's in Cleveland, North Carolina. The man is a content machine. So say what you want about him. I've been on the show a couple times. I respect the hustle. So speaking of, I was on a show talking about Watson, and this was a couple weeks ago, and I was explaining to him, this case, the fact that they didn't get an indictment is going to make the civil cases more loaded, because it's going to make Busby reassess, and it's going to make him double down, triple down, and try to find another way to really, drive Watson crazy. So what he has done, it's either genius or it's evil. It's one of the, whatever you want to call it, depending on your perspective. Early on in this case, when people started saying, how did Watson have 40 masseuses? That's kind of bizarre. During COVID, when you weren't supposed to be having interactions with that many human beings, the man over I think it's about a year and a half period, saw 40 different masseuses that didn't seem to be affiliated with the Texans. Odd, just strange. I'm not going to say it's an allegation, but if it's true, it's just odd. I don't know if it necessarily is a crime that's occurring. It's just not normal. So why we were saying 40 is because 22 women had filed civil lawsuits. There's a few others that filed criminal complaints, spoke with Sports Illustrated, that did not file any type of legal proceeding. But there are 18 women that filed statements and gave a sign of approval for Watson. And the women essentially said in various forms, I've given him Deshaun a massage before and I never had any issues. I've given him a massage before, never had any issues. I've never had any issues with him at all. So now what Busby is asking for, this is this evil genius type line that we're at. He wants discovery into Watson's relationships, be it financial or sexual, whatever it is, with these 18 women. He wants to know the motivation, if any, as to why they were so inclined to be nice to him. Was it because that he was paying them off? Was it because he had some type of relationship with them? Is it because potentially they consented to his passes at them, right? So it's a whole can of worms Busby's playing to open here. And, say what you want about Busby. The guy is in probably dire straits from a optic standpoint. No criminal charges, right? And the indictment is a lower standard than a civil court of law. I understand that the indictments are a little bit tough to victims of sexual assault cases. I'm just telling you what the optics are. How could you if you don't get an indictment, how are you going to win in civil court? I'm not me saying this. I'm just reading, the social media, flavor. But how Busby is spinning this, he's going to point out, he's going to make Watson crazy. Imagine if some allegation came out that Watson paid off those people to speak in his support. That would be a whole other can of worms. So, Tarun, Mike, I'll give it to you. I don't think Busby's done fighting back here, though.
No, Busby's clearly relentless. We still have zero hope of a settlement, right? Like, this isn't, the extended time is not going to give them an opening to possibly reach a settlement, do you think, right?
I still think settlement's unlikely. Watson in his statement, remember, he goes, I think he was like, my intention is to not settle these cases. So, yeah. The Browns fans in my reply saying like, why isn't he just settling this? Because he's got a reputation to uphold, but he's fighting a tough one here.
Well, the leverage kind of switched to answer that, Tarun. The leverage was in favor, I believe, of the civil plaintiffs when you look at the optics of the criminal complaints, and to what Dan just said, when there was twice they failed to indict him, the leverage kind of swings back onto Deshaun Watson, because I have to imagine that Rusty Hardin and him are like, hey, look, there were criminal complaints. You all have very similar, lawsuits. So, not all of you filed criminal complaints, but the few of you that did, your lawsuits are very similar to these allegations, and went in front of a grand jury twice and they failed to indict. So I can't imagine that whatever they were offering, if Busby was even offering some sort of demand for a settlement, making a demand for a settlement, I have to imagine that had to drastically go down if there was anything there, because at that point now that you've got Rusty Hardin saying, look, the criminal indictments didn't even happen. So if you can't win on that front, then how are you going to win on the civil? And again, that's just the optics of it.
So I think this is a good time. We'll put Watson in the books. Obviously, we keep tabs on that one. So with that said, I think it's a good time to move over. Let's talk about some college football. We mentioned it at the top. There's an interesting lawsuit. Maybe we'll try to hit one of these every so often. But a sports law lawsuit that's going on that not enough people are talking about. So in 2017, Willie Taggart took over for the University of Oregon. I'm not going to get you the whole history of this, but Oregon had gone off a number of years making bowl games, winning records. And they had a really bad year. I think it was 2016. I might be a year off, but I think it's 2016. And this guy, Willie Taggart, was brought in to help revive Oregon. The reason I know so much random details, I was listening to opening statements today. I was listening to directs across. We have an ongoing trial, which by the time we listen to it, I think it's going to be a trial for at least a week. So I'll probably send out the link so people can watch it. But here's the gist of it. This new coach came in and he wanted to basically put a system in place of really heavy strength and conditioning. Early on in the session, he had the strength and conditioning coach who's also a defendant in this lawsuit, basically running drills that were very, very intensive. A number of players, I think it's a handful, it's like 3 or 4 players, claimed and actually, sought medical treatment for, I'm not going to get the medical name right, but it was a form of a kidney disease that resulted as a result of these heavy workouts. That was the allegation. One particular player now has a case in front of court, Doug Brenner, an offensive lineman with the team, is essentially saying, I've suffered permanent damage to my kidney. He has an expert testifying that he's lost 10 years of his life expectancy because of these really hard drills and inhumane conditions. So he's suing the strength and conditioning coach. His name is Coach Irel Oderin. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the Oregon football team. He's now the strength and conditioning coach at South Florida's women's basketball team. Willie Taggart, the coach that was at Oregon, bolted Oregon the next year for Florida State, and now he's the head coach at Florida Atlantic. So those are your 2 coach defendants. They were in charge of running this drill. Oregon is sued. And then interestingly, guys, the NCAA is sued. And the allegation being that they should have been doing more to kind of police what schools were doing for their workouts. It is a $120 million lawsuit, basically 20 in pain and suffering for the actual kidney harm, loss of quality, or loss of years of his life, but an $100 million claim when it comes to punitive damages from the NCAA. So they're really going after the NCAA. Mind you guys, last thing, and then I'll just paint the stage a little bit. This case is in Oregon, right? So we have a former player suing former coaches of the school, suing the university, right, and suing the NCAA. I know you guys both have dug into this, but it's a fascinating lawsuit. Opening statements, closing, cross. You want to watch a trial? This thing's going on right now.
I'm just going to jump in before Tarun does, because I know he's got a lot of coverage on this. I just wanted to read, you were talking about the difficulty of workouts. This is just the allegations that the workouts were at 6 a.m. and they were 4 days a week and they lasted from 60 to 90 minutes. And that the allegation was that the staff did not make water available in the workout room for at least the first day of the workouts. Lawsuit also states that there was about 40 players in each group, and they had to do 10 perfect push-ups in unison. And if one of the athletes was out of sync or failed to use the perfect technique, all the players had to do up downs, which is basically, if you don't know what an up down is, you're like standing and then you have to like drop to the ground and do like a push-up and then jump back up. If they failed to do that, they had to do up downs and then start the drill over again, which again was 10 perfect push-ups. And basically that happened over several days, 4 days a week. And student athletes were, getting sick, passing out, collapsing. Dan, I'm going to attempt. They suffered from rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis. That's pretty good.
I put it in the YouTube the pronunciation. It's close. It's not
rhabdomyolysis. That's close. And it's a skeletal muscle tissue deterioration, and it causes damage to the kidneys.
When the players were diagnosed with this, I'm not going to even try the word, the strength and conditioning coach was suspended contemporaneously. So when these players were diagnosed with it, the strength and conditioning coach was suspended. So that's important for the evidentiary system here. There was some immediate discipline that was given.
That means that they recognized that something was wrong. But this is also after the fact. They continued on with these workouts, right? You had student athletes passing out. No, granted, I've been in some difficult workouts that made me, not feel great, but like to a certain extent, like you stop and get help, right? They just kept going. And then rather than stopping the entire workouts, they had staff bringing in oxygen tanks for the second day. Like that's clear that if your player needs oxygen tanks from a weightlifting session and a workout session, that's ridiculous. I just wanted to read one more thing. And again, I'm going to kick it to Tarun. Another allegation from the lawsuit was that Taggart, the head coach, former head coach, Willie Taggart, told players when he was hired that he and the new coaches were going to focus on discipline and strength and conditioning, and that they were going to, quote, find the snakes in the grass and cut their heads off.
Oh my
So that's unbelievable that they're basically saying that they're going to weed out the weakest link and make sure that they never step foot on the field. This is unbelievable. And granted, this is a Nike school. This is like the Nike school. Like Phil Knight lives down the street and they have like a personal, like, knock on my door if you need money type of deal going on. Like, this is unreal that this is happening to one of the largest Nike endorsed programs in the nation, probably behind Ohio State, I think, if you do the money.
Tarun, I was about to let you jump in, but it's more fun now that we're just not letting you talk. And it's really quick. So I need to, Mike, you're reading my mind on good stuff to add here. So I want to give you one little thing. Tarun, we're setting you up. This is going to be the alley-oop of all alley-oops. You're going to come and you're going to crush it. So this guy Taggart had a reputation for turning around programs, for being a program saver. So I was listening to the opening arguments that it was actually, or opening statements. I don't want to call it arguments. That's the name of our show. But that he was at Western Kentucky for a couple of years. He turned around that program. South Florida, he turned around that program. If anybody knows, South Florida had a very, very good track record. And then he went to Oregon. So that was his track record. He'd really run people down and he'd build people up, and then people would leave the program. So that was his system. So there is some seeds of truth to this. But Tarun, I'll hand it over to you.
So the allegations reminded me of, there's this great book, Gene Wojciechowski, but it's called The Last Great Game. It's about that 92 Elite Eight game between Duke and Kentucky. But it talks about both programs and how they got to that point. And the first thing that Rick Pitino did when he got in there was to bring in a sort of a strength and conditioning coach. He had a system that was called Coach Buddy, and basically he was running the Kentucky basketball players to death, and they would bring out trash cans for them to puke, and it was like a foregone conclusion that they were going to puke at some point during every single workout. So it reminded me of that when I heard that they had brought in these trash cans, and it's really the nasty underbelly of it. I think that a lot of the questions that are being asked in this lawsuit are along the same lines of the questions that the NLRB is going to be considering in these employment cases that have been filed related to USC and UCLA. Who is policing the workouts? Who is in charge? And does that level of control rise to the level necessary for employment? And so I think all of these things are connected, and it's going to be interesting to see whether, if a settlement is reached or if a verdict is found in this player Brenner's favor, whether that affects the next domino that we know is going to fall at some point.
You have to keep watching it as the trial continues. Again, some of the allegations are just it's rooted in negligence, right? And the first time you see some sort of negligent cause of action or negligence lawsuit against something that has to do with sports, the first thing that pops in your head is assumption of the risk, right? Like if you see this just on like a surface level, you're like, well, he's a football player, he assumed that risk, right? Like, there's a lot of different things that happen in baseball or football, all these sports. It's an assumed risk that you'll get injured, right? But you don't assume this risk. You can't assume the negligence of somebody else, right? That's the whole cause of action for negligence. You can't assume the negligence of this head coach for allowing this to happen, the strength and conditioning coach for allowing and fostering this to happen. So it's clearly that the negligence stems from the physical punishment, failing to prohibit this, failing to have these adequate measures in place. I think the punitive side of it too, you have to see, I'm quoting from the lawsuit again, they acted with malice, or they were showing reckless and outrageous indifference to highly unreasonable risks of harm. When you hear that language, whenever I hear reckless and outrageous, it kind of makes me think of like the criminal sense, but like this is like a really high level of negligence that was happening here. But I did want to read one quote that I read from Jason Caffery, who was one of Brenner, the plaintiff, Doug Brenner's attorneys. He had two quotes that ran in the ESPN article that I think are very fascinating. He said, "The NFL doesn't kill its players. That only happens in college because the NCAA refuses to create rules to protect its student athletes during early season strength and conditioning." And then he goes on to say, "The purpose of this lawsuit is to force the NCAA to change its mind." Now, when I read that as a plaintiff's personal injury attorney, I'm like, No, the purpose of this lawsuit is because of the injuries that happened to your client, not because you're trying to make the NCAA change their mind. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I understand what he's saying, but it's just like, it just didn't make sense to me. Dan, I know you want to jump into your chomping.
I just want to defend the NCAA, Mike. You just want
I know you want to defend the NCAA. I'm just going to read one part of what they stated as a defense. They said, the NCAA has bylaws, right? The overarching bylaws that instruct what the conferences and its member schools are supposed to do. The NCAA says here they don't have the authority to pass health and safety bylaws, and that they leave that solely up to the member schools and the conferences. So they're alleging that they are out of this and they don't have the authority here and they can't be sued because this is something that is solely done by the schools and the conferences. So Dan, I know you want to go dive deep into the defense here.
I mean, that was part of it. I mean, you're hitting it. I think there's another line that's important from the deposition testimony of Mark Emmert. But the NCAA is saying, and it makes sense. Who's at fault here? The coach, right? Strength and conditioning coach that was running the drills, he's at fault. The head coach who ran the practice, he's at fault. The university that pays their bills, so they're probably liable from some form of vicarious liability, respondeat superior. What did we do? We're the NCAA. We're not there. So Mike, you were talking about the plaintiff's attorney. You're trying to paint a picture of the NFL doesn't let their players get hurt because the NFL is not run the same way as the NCAA is run. The NFL is collectively bargained for. There's a relationship, a very clear one between the members, the member teams and the league. They are one and the same. The NCAA and Oregon are not one and the same. It's a very different relationship. So
they'd have to have notice. They'd have to have notice.
Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Oregon is an independently functioning university. They're in the best place. I'm just saying this. They're in the best place to run their own practices. The NCAA operates in one state. They're not a national entity. The NCAA is not at every practice, and it would be kind of crazy for them to police every practice and have an NCAA coordinator at every event. That should be on the school to some extent. I think so. So this is a quote from Mark Emmert's deposition. Mark Emmert, president again of the NCAA, goes, "I've never talked to a president, to a school president, that they think that the responsibility is of a sports association to tell them how their medical professionals and training professionals should behave on campus." He goes on, "Rather, the association's role is to provide them with guidance and advice and understanding of where the best science is and medical advice, but not to police their local behavior. That's not been a role that the association in 115 years has ever been deemed was the appropriate thing for an athletic association to do." I'll just put it pretty bluntly. I told you I've been on the defense side. The NCAA is in the case because they are a very big pocket that is not headquartered in Oregon, right? This is an Oregon court. If they're going to get that $100 million in punitives, and punitives are given based off some really long-standing practice. That's really disgusting how it's done. Guys, bipartisan issue, right? Democrats, Republicans hate the NCAA. Schools, players hate the NCAA. Everyone on this podcast hates the NCAA. You know who's going to hate the NCAA, guys? Ready for this? Jurors are going to hate the NCAA. So I was watching a little bit of reading up on jury selection, and a lot of jurors were ruled out because of their affiliation, and they're obviously a lot of them are going to be Oregon Ducks fans. I promise you, there are not many NCAA fans in Oregon. It's not going to happen. So that's why the NCAA is in the case. They're a monstrous pocket. There's going to be they're going to try to knock down the damage in this case. That you're not knocking 10 years off of someone's life if you're harming their kidneys. That part's gravy, but. This lawsuit is really seeking to change the NCAA's role in the safety of practices. So maybe it's not a sexy topic, but it's a really important sports level topic that impacts every school, the D1 through D3 level. So rest assured, if the NCAA gets held in on this case for a number in the 8 figures, potentially 9 figures, it can change college sports in a very interesting and unique way. I think we've probably exhausted it. It's a lawsuit. When we have the verdict, we'll talk about it. But people are in the weeds. It's a good one. Okay. At this stage, we did talk about Kevin Darby. He's a Fordham 3L1 March Madness. Picked Kansas. He does a good job at laying out. He's got a great background. He served in the Navy for a number of years before going to law school. Yeah, I think it's about time. We kick it over to our guest, Kevin Darby, Fordham Law School Conduct Detrimental Madness winner. Kevin Darby, the winner of the inaugural Conduct Detrimental March Madness. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Listen, sometimes, we opened it up. We had 150 plus contestants. And wouldn't you know, a 3L from my alma mater, Fordham Law School, won the competition. You picked Kansas correctly. So listen, this is your time to do your humble brag. You beat out the entire field. So what was it that you liked Kansas? Was it a shot in the dark? You had some real faith over there.
Well, I have to start out by admitting that I can't take all the credit. So I worked on this with my girlfriend, Parker, who's another Fordham 3L, another proud member of the Sports Law Forum board at Fordham. And she's the one who actually reminded me that she had seen your post about starting the bracket pool. And I had kind of mindlessly filled out a few brackets the morning of the first day of the tournament. And she said, you need to get into Dan Luff's pool before this time expires. I slid her the computer. I said, hey, help me make some picks. And she probably had seen me pick a bunch of Gonzaga pools, a couple Arizona. I think I had in one or two of them that I was just filling out mindlessly on ESPN. I didn't even think about it a second time because I just wanted to enjoy the games and not even kind of keep track of who I had picked. And wouldn't you know it, after that crazy Duke Carolina game, I get a message saying like, hey, if Kansas wins the whole shebang, you're going to win it all.
A message from some lunatic named Dan, right?
Yeah. And I opened up the bracket and I said, Parker, you're not going to believe what your bracket is doing right now. And it was, yeah. And we rooted hard for the biggest comeback in NCAA tournament championship game history.
Yeah. I think you responded. You gave me like a rock chalk Jayhawk. And I'm like, this guy, Kevin, knows his stuff. Rock chalk. So yeah, all good. You the finals came down to you and a still unknown fan of ours from Nebraska. We have many. So you saved us a situation where I had to disqualify someone from Nebraska, which really would not have gone well. So Kevin, you saved the day here. So Kevin, why we have you on? Obviously, the prize for winning Conduct Detrimental March Madness is you to come on the show for a little bit. You're going to be a part of the newsletter, which Tarun is here. Obviously, he'll give you the Q&A afterwards. But I really want to get into two things. I mean, I could probably bother you about Fordham Sports Law Forum, which I can do a lot. We've done on the show. You are a veteran of the Tulane baseball arbitration competition. I'm going to let you listen. I've sung the high praise of Fordham. I'm going to give you the floor for a minute. Fordham Sports Law Forum. You guys are part of this ongoing baseball dynasty. You guys keep winning. What's in the waters over at Fordham?
I think there's just something about how we have really empowered the first year law student at Fordham Law and our Sports Law Forum just from the outset advertises the people who want to make a difference completely distinct from the rest of their peers as one else who are not yet competing on moot court or any type of dispute resolution society. Immediately we advertise for someone who doesn't even need to know how this process works in Major League Baseball, but just wants to improve the oral advocacy skills and do it before any of their peers. It just so happens we've had a couple of years in a row now of some sustained success and people who are really passionate about doing a job well done. And and it's turned out to be pretty fun part of it as well, meeting a bunch of my best friends from law school the past 3 years for being involved as a competitor my first year to coaching the last 2 years.
When you and I were talking, we were trying to talk about what we wanted to get over, obviously. So Fordham Sports Law Forum, I can keep singing the high praises. They obviously have the National Basketball Negotiation Competition. You guys have won, I think, 3 of the last 4. Is that right for the Tulane baseball? Or is it 3 in a row?
2019, 2020, and now 2022. Yeah, 3 of the last 4.
It's pretty impressive. So we'll call that, I'm happy to call that a dynasty, my words. And then I tried to, which you were a part of this, Kevin, and I was at the Fordham Sports Law Symposium. I was having a lot of fun on this podcast like 2 months ago. And I'm like, yeah, the first ever sports law competition dynasty. You know the story, you're smiling, but like the Villanova people like, no, F you, Lust, that's not true. And then, because I was at the symposium, I didn't know how big this gotten. But the Fordham people were like, no, there was a battle for 24 hours in the Instagram stories. We're sending it to people. I'm sorry if I got you guys in trouble with Villanova, but there was a real battle that ensued in that story.
Yeah, I think if there's a last word on that, from my perspective, is that I'll stay out of what the current situation is. My only interaction with Villanova, as in the baseball realm, was we played them, or we competed against them in the semifinals of my 1L year. We had the fortune of beating them on our way to winning the championship in 2020.
This is some developments here because
that's a good humble brag, right?
No, well, Tarun, this is very interesting because Villanova keeps saying, "Oh, we won the football competition, like we're the greatest." But I was not aware of any head-to-head matchups during this period of time. So if we're trying to figure out who's better, if Fordham has beat Villanova head-to-head, I mean, that's Tarun. Like, I'm a little biased here, but I feel like it's pretty important.
You're right. You are a little biased.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So, Kevin, so we were talking about different stuff and I didn't want to lose sight of this. So, as we do on the show, we tend to give career advice time to time. You have an interesting background. Well, I don't want to give it away. But the four of us were talking before we started. But Tarun, I'll hand it over to you. I mean, I saw your eyes percolating. Mine were too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, no, Kevin, you've had an incredible road to get to this point. Maybe you could just tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I would consider myself a little bit on the older side of your traditional law student. I went to the United States Naval Academy for undergrad and graduated back in 2013 and served two different tours on two different destroyers, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast as a surface warfare officer, and most recently as the navigator of my ship before moving to New York City to attend Fordham. I had the fortune as well of getting an opportunity to join the JAG Corps as an attorney upon my completion of law school here in the spring. So I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I took that little circuitous route to getting there, but to me, it was the best of both worlds to continue to serve in just a different capacity and something that I was really passionate about doing.
For our listeners that don't necessarily know what the JAG Corps is, can you tell us a little bit about what type of work that you'll be doing?
Yeah, it's essentially the Navy's law firm, right? There are different buckets, departments of what Navy legal services can do, but kind of the Reader's Digest version is we have our litigators, we have our in-house counsel who are on the staffs for captains and admirals, and we have the legal assistance team who provides legal services to sailors, veterans for anything they might need, like routine clerical administrative types things too. So me personally, I'm hoping to gain a litigation track, fingers crossed on that. But yeah, I'll start my kind of revamp back into the Navy come August.
They tell you where you'll be placed yet?
Yeah, just about a month ago, I found out that my first duty station will be in Washington, D.C. at the Navy Yard.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You'll be right down there for some ball games. That's right next to Nats Park, right?
Yeah, I expect my Mets will be there at least 9 to 10 times, a couple series, and I'll cheer them proudly in enemy territory.
Now I know why you guys like each other. You have in the Mets stuff. You guys have ESP over here. But Kevin, it's a really, really cool background. You gave us some interesting insight that only 5 people in the country are picked for this kind of scholarship through the Navy each year to go to law school. Is that right? That's right. Yeah, I think you could say that 99% of the Navy's lawyers are chosen, as recruited straight out of law school. And the Navy has kind of created this niche of lawyers that they want to snag from the pool of people who are already active duty officers and get that fleet experience into their law firm and kind of add that talent into how they handle their legal matters. So listen, it's awesome. And we obviously we thank you for our service. You're doing much more, probably at some point, much more important stuff than we are doing talking about sports law here. I have one piece of advice for you, my friend. Are you ready? Absolutely. You dropped this nugget here, and I didn't lose sight of it. And I knew our listeners heard it. You said you worked on 2 different destroyers. Did I hear that term properly? That's correct. Yes. Okay. If and when you open up your own law firm, I would like you to call it Destroyer Law LLC. Okay. Destroyer Law. I'll write that down.
Made for a billboard. That is
Destroyer Law. I mean, that I would.
The Darby Destroyers.
Yeah, I'm settling all my cases. I am not getting destroyed in court by Destroyer Law LLC. Kevin, congrats again for winning. At some point, we're going to put together a fancy trophy and I'll etch on the names and the history of Conduct Detrimental March Madness. But you're the first ever winner, so you always have that. I'm proud. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for representing Fordham, representing our country, and thank you for fighting the good fight over there. Thanks, guys.
Well, that segment was brought to you by our new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, and I want to tell you about the easiest and most fun way to spice up your baseball season. It's Underdog Fantasy and their brand new Pick'em game. Just pick over or under your favorite or least favorite player's stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players, and you could take home some cold, hard cash. Use code CONDUCT, that's CONDUCT. Get your first deposit doubled by Underdog.
Tarun, that was the best thing you've ever done. It was just the best read. We told our friends at Underdog Fantasy that we would bring the spice to the ad reads. Listen, Underdog Fantasy, those guys are great. Tarun, that was an amazing ad read. I love it. So Underdog Fantasy, promo code CONDUCT. At a later point in time, we're going to use that segment to talk about our dogs because Bandit is their dog, which I've spoke about in the previous show, but we have some clearance. So, Tarun, that was tremendous. I think if people weren't going to use Underdog before, they're going to use it now because you just brought so much spice to that. Tarun, I'm almost of the opinion that you might need to use that voice for the rest of the podcast. I mean, that was just so impressive. Okay, my favorite segment, what to watch for. We'll go over the stuff that we are looking forward to that people should be paying attention to in between podcasts. Mike, kick us off.
All right, mine is the Yankees letter, the sign stealing saga. This is the letter that was ordered to be released from the Second Circuit. The Yankees letter contains information into the sign stealing investigation that Major League Baseball was doing. Well, what's interesting to me is in the Yankees appeal, they wrote that they believed Major League Baseball mistakenly produced the Yankees letter prior to the argument of their motion to dismiss. And that's why this was coming out. They were trying to order this to be released because Major League Baseball did an oopsie and included a confidential letter that was now should be discoverable. And then they're arguing that this enables the right to unseal confidential documents used in court motion papers. Also, that this would allow private confidential business investigations to be forced to be made public. So they filed their appeal. And it's an en banc appeal. So if you want to go into your rule book here, this is Rule 35 of the federal rules. And this is necessary to secure or maintain uniformity in the court's decision. So it's going to go in front of all 13 judges who sit on the Second Circuit, and they need to vote a majority vote. So that means at least 7 of them have to rule in favor to actually hear this, to have a rehearing on the court order of the release of this letter. So we will we'll see if they actually vote in favor of the en banc review, but we'll definitely let you know once it does.
Can I just add one thing, Mike? Major League Baseball, I don't think, is a part of this appeal. They were part of the appeal from the SDNY to the Second Circuit appeal, but I don't believe it's a joint appeal to now the en banc. So the line that you just said that Major League Baseball made an oopsie, that was the first time I saw it in those articles that you and I were looking at. So the Yankees are kind of throwing the Major League Baseball under the bus here. And just so everyone's clear, we spoke about this in a prior podcast, but somebody asked me, they're like, why is the issue of this one letter, why is this the subject of appeal? Because the underlying case has been dismissed. It is by no means normal. It is also not that normal for the Yankees to say, there's nothing in the letter, we have nothing to worry about, it's already previously been disclosed, while on the other hand saying, we are going to fight this letter to the United States Supreme Court. No one can see what's in the letter. It is so hurtful to our privacy interest. So, Mike, we have to premise to everybody that you are a Yankees fan and that you just assume that this letter is not going to be that bad. I think the letter could be bad. I'm happy to be wrong, but I think the letter could be bad. I don't know why the Yankees would be fighting so hard if it wasn't that bad.
It changed my opinion because I had originally thought that the Yankees were actually protecting Major League Baseball because I thought that the release of this letter was going to come out in something that Manfred said or that Major League Baseball had done in their investigation implies that there is other people involved or something like that where it's private. But now the fact that the Yankees are so gung-ho and pushing forward, it makes me believe that it's them, that somebody internally within the Yankees organization that knew about something or something that implies that. So I agree. I think that there might be some sort of, and the fact that they keep saying it's so private and sensitive third parties and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. Let's see.
We'll see if we get Evan Drellick on the podcast to talk about it. We'll see what happens. But that appeal is supposed to come down in the next couple of weeks. So we're on it. Tarun, you're up.
Yeah, really big news this week. The Lerner family, which has owned the Washington Nationals since 2006, and as I mentioned earlier, helped get Nationals Park and all the development down near Navy Yard built. They've hired a investment bank, and they're going to explore selling the team. The team, obviously, they spent a lot on it, $450 million, and then invested heavily in the club's player personnel over the last several years. But they could fetch north of $2 billion, I think, in a sale. So it makes sense now with Ted Lerner being at 96 years old and Mark Lerner having battled cancer a couple of times and even lost his leg, that they would explore this sale now as the patriarchs are getting older. So that's my what to watch for.
My what to watch for, I'll keep it short and sweet. Tarun, you had acknowledged it earlier. Clayton Kershaw, 80 pitches through 7 innings, a perfecto on the line, and they pull him. So, I am happy that baseball's back. I guess my what to watch for is more controversies that are relating to sports issues and not necessarily legal issues. We love covering the legal stuff, but the sports stuff is fun. So I'm hoping baseball can make a comeback. That's, I guess, my what to watch for coming up, just my scheduling stuff. Last month, after like a year and a half of no in-person, symposiums or anything, I did Fordham Law School last month. I did New York Law School last week. And this week, I'm actually driving to Philadelphia to the Temple Sports. I think we'll call it their sports symposium, but it's Temple undergrad. So it's fun. We're back in networking season. So if anyone's out in Philly, I will be there on April 15th. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. Mike, Tarun, anything else to add before we put this show in the books?
Tarun, are you expecting Jeff Bezos to buy the Nats?
I think he'd have more money than all of the other owners combined. So that'd be fascinating.
Maybe Elon Musk.
Yeah. Well, either of them could just spit on the Steve Cohen tax. They could buy the entire league.
They would definitely have the first $300 million team salary.
Guys, NBA Finals, quick picks, rapid fire. I'm going to go dark horse, Ja Morant, the number 2 seeded Grizzlies. Mike, who you got?
I got to go with my Sixers.
Tarun.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Bucks back to back. Why not? I love Giannis. I hope they win.
Okay, let's see. Friendly bet. Let's maybe make some wagers over on Underdog Fantasy. How about that? 2 reads for our friends over. And
I just want to see Pat Beverly continue to drink Bud Lights and post game interviews
and cry for being the 7th seed in the playoff. That was a fantastic look.
This franchise has won nothing ever. So
they're another Minnesota team. Do you have season tickets?
No, I don't. But they reacted in a totally normal way. The Timberwolves are awesome, actually. They give out a lot of student discount tickets. So I've been.
That's A-Rod, baby.
Tarun, I'm looking forward to you seeing more 7-inning perfect games live. That's pretty crazy that you were there today. So I think that'll put this episode in the books for our whole Conduct Detrimental family. We are at Con Detrimental, our Gmail account, condetrimental@gmail.com. Always looking for new writers. We'll probably do something in the next month or so. We have 2 big projects in the works going on behind the scenes. You guys will find out about it soon enough, but we're always looking to add some more team members to our family. So if you want to join us, shoot us a DM, shoot us an email, all that good stuff. For all of us here, we will see you next time on another episode of Conduct Detrimental.